guys, this is my review of the Panasonic G85. I've had this camera now for a couple of weeks. I've gone out shooting with it a couple times, so I wanted to go ahead and give my impressions of it, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and kind of where I see this camera being in my kit. So I'll go ahead and say the ergonomics of this camera are pretty good. You have a good deep grip on this, which is kind of unusual for a mirrorless camera. For instance, the Fujifilm X-T2, it's a fantastic camera, but the grip on it's a little bit shallow for my taste. So when you're using telephoto glass, it's good to have a good deep grip on it so you can better stabilize your camera for shooting. So I really like the feel of this in hand. Of course, you have twin dials, front and back, so you can control aperture and shutter speed without having to toggle your dial function. You have a ton of custom buttons on this thing, and these function buttons, you have them labeled all the way 1 through 5, and then you have some virtual touch buttons on here, you have one up here. There's really no wanting for customizable controls on this camera. I do like that there's not a control ring here, that these are just buttons, which is good to have, you know, more solid controls than a fiddly little ring like on my LX100. You get a nice big viewfinder, XGA resolution. It would have been nice to have the one that's on the G85, but you know, you've got to justify over double the cost somehow, and that's one of the ways that they do that. I like the flip out screen. It's pretty solid, doesn't really have any play in it. Now, one issue I do have with the screen though is the placement of the headphone jack. You'll see here that it has a way of blocking it from rotating. And this is kind of an odd misstep, because in the Panasonic G7 the headphone jack was actually placed up here out of the way of the flip screen. And that's where it was in the GH4, and that's where it is in the GH5, but for some reason they moved it down here, and I guess they did that just to have all the ports neatly behind this door, so they wouldn't have them separated. So I guess I can see the reasoning, but it's kind of a bummer, because that was one thing that a lot of people really liked about the G7, was you could flip that screen around and not have to worry about where your microphone is plugged in. So moving on to the front of the camera, this is where the new magnesium alloy casing comes into play, and that's basically one continuous panel that runs from this part line here. This whole it's most the bottom of the camera is magnesium, and it extends up and around the lens mount, around the release button, all the way up top underneath where it says LUMIX. And then on this side as well. So that, structurally speaking, that seems to be a really good place to have magnesium, because you're reinforcing that lens mount all the way down to the tripod mount. It's kind of funny that Nikon actually doesn't do it this way. They build their cameras, even the D5, with magnesium everywhere except the front plate. And this camera, it's magnesium on the front plate and plastic everywhere else. So in my opinion, having that magnesium secured into the lens mount, secured into the tripod mount, is really good for this camera, especially with long lenses that might put a lot of stress on it. So I applaud Panasonic for doing this with the LUMIX G85. It's one thing that's a definite step up from the G7, and some could argue even plays into heat dissipation a little bit for all those 4K videos, which, as you know, in this camera you can record them without any time limit. One note on this neck strap, it's nice and wide, it's comfortable, but unfortunately the lettering on it is just silk screened on. It's not embroidered as it is in the GH4 and GH5, which is kind of a shame. I wish they would at least sell an upgraded strap that does have this embroidered. It's just a little thing, but I'm kind of worried that after a couple years it might be, you know, peeling off or not holding up as well as it could. Now, one thing I love about the Micro Four Thirds system, and one major advantage I see of it compared to where it came from, which is Pentax, is they have a lineup of some nice modern, fast, well-made lenses, such as this 42.5 f1.7 and the kit lens, the 12-60 f3.5 to 4.5. This is a weather-sealed lens. Both of them have very fast, silent autofocus. This one especially is super sharp. This one for a kit lens it's pretty sharp. It's nothing outstanding, but it's a solid effort. And they're both just solid, modern, well-made lenses, and they're light and they're fast and they're just a pleasure to shoot with. Now let's get into the image quality. Right away you notice the lack of the AA filter. When you view your images at pixel level, there's a certain really crisp quality to the shots that I just love. In this shot and the next one, you'll see how much I was able to pull up those shadows and still get some good clean detail. You don't get the gritty green shadows that I got with my LX100. Is it as clean as my K52S, my Pentax with the APS-C sensor? No, but it's not that far off. It's not going to be a problem, I don't think. So this shot here, you can see how well the 42.5 1.7 rendered the bokeh. In this shot, you can see, wow, that 25 wide open at 0.95 really looks good. I mean, you'd never know this was taken with a micro 4/3 sensor. And yeah, I mean, these next couple are going to be with the 25 wide open pretty much. But I really enjoyed shooting it with it. It was light, it was silent. That the shutter on this thing is so quiet. It's just like a whisper. I'd say the biggest thing I didn't like about it was the battery life. When I was going around in Charleston, shooting for about 4 or 5 hours, I ended up with only about 80 shots, but my battery was totally gone. It was down to 0, and I actually had to leave early because I didn't have a second battery. Didn't have anything else to use. So maybe I need to work on my battery life management a little bit more now that I have mirrorless. With my Pentax, I could shoot like all week on the same battery. Maybe it's just the fact that it's a brand new battery, it has to get broken in. But I'd say that's the biggest criticism I have of this camera. Everything else really impressed me. I definitely recommend it if you're at all inclined towards video. This would be my #1 pick for a new camera today. If you're more into stills, I'd say a better value would be something like the Nikon D7200. I just helped my buddy find one on eBay for like $720 brand new body only, which is a fantastic deal to get that 24 megapixel sensor. Also a big fan of the Fuji X-T1, X-T2. Either one, awesome for stills. So yeah, I mean, I really recommend the G85. Awesome camera, and I look forward to what Panasonic does with this in the future. Alright, well, thanks for watching.